Welcome to the Crime Redefined podcast, produced by Zero Cliff Media. Coming to you from the US Bank Tower, high above downtown Los Angeles. In our podcast, we drill deep into forensics and criminal investigation from the viewpoint of the defense, as well as explore the intersection of the media and the justice system.
Welcome to the Crime Redefined podcast. I'm Mehul Angeria, here with my co-host Dion Mitchell. And on Crime Redefined, we strive to not be your typical true crime podcast. So along those lines, we have a guest today with a topic that seemingly has nothing at all to do with crime.
That's absolutely correct, Mehul. Today, we're going to interview a man by the name of Roger BelAir, a former finance professional who once met with Warren Buffett and was on the cover of Money magazine. He is going to talk about his love of pickleball.
Why, you say? Why would we talk to Roger about pickleball and finance? Well, Mr. BelAir has actually been going inside jails and prisons in the U.S. to teach pickleball to the detainees. And it's actually been an incredibly effective means of teaching them life skills, interpersonal skills, and behavior control.
So there you have it. An unassuming Roger BelAir comes face to face with very tough customers and can connect with their humanity, no matter what the gang affiliation or hardened persona they try to put on.
Yes, and as you'll hear in the interview, it all started by Roger watching a 60-minute segment about the Cook County Jail in Chicago. And as we all know, I think Chicago is the epicenter of homicide in the U.S. Well, now Roger's story is all over the media, including a front-page story on USA Today.
So with that set up, Mehul, we'll let Roger tell his stories. And as always, we'll chime in with our thoughts after the interview. Be ready to be amazed by Roger BelAir's mission. Welcome to Crime Redefined, Roger.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here.
So thanks for taking time out of your day to share your story with us. Appreciate it.
Well, it certainly has been an interesting story so far, and I don't know exactly where it's headed, but it's real exciting to look at the future.
Well, let's go back a little bit, Roger. You've got a very interesting backstory. So can you tell us a little bit about your past career in finance and real estate and some of the levels you reached in your profession? I mean, I understand you actually met with Warren Buffett.
I was in a meeting with him at one time. Well, my background was really in finance. I guess growing up, I was always driven to have a certain amount of financial success. But my focus was not so much about materialistic goods. What I always believed, and I still believe today, is what money does is it gives you options. It allows you to make choices. And that, of course, I felt was a very worthwhile goal. So I started out being a stockbroker, and that wasn't quite right fit for me. So I went into banking, and I had a fairly successful career. But one thing I learned about being a banker is, geez, you know, you're around a lot of money, but not much of it ends up in your pocket. Or if it does, you're doing something wrong. So I started dabbling in real estate on the outside, and in a particular type of real estate called buying discount mortgages. And I started out with a great deal of trepidation. I made a $4,500 investment. It worked. I did it again and again. And then I had something that changed my life. A stringer from Money magazine came to me and said, we'd like to do a story about you and your business partner and what you do, because we're always looking for different investment approaches. Well, they interviewed us, and we ended up on the cover of Money magazine. And
wow.
1984. And guys, that type of publicity can just change your life. It did mine. And what happened was I got a variety of calls from around the country. I got a call from an editor at Doubleday out in New York and said, have you ever thought about writing a book? Well, my first reaction was, I don't even write my mother. But if some of these athletes can do it, maybe I can, maybe I could do it. And they said, we'll get you some help if you need it. And I sat down with what was called a typewriter. And, here's the P, here's the R. And
wait, pause. Should we explain that to our listeners?
We might have to.
What is a typewriter?
Yeah. Well, probably some people say, oh man, this must have been about the 19th century. But the book came out and it sold really well. It surprised me. It surprised Doubleday. They said, next time we'll put some money behind it. and market the book. But that was a life-changing moment for me, because what happened was I left the bank. I was doing well with my investments. And then the American Management Association came to me and asked me to write a book on how to borrow money from a banker. It was for the business community. And I thought that's a great idea, because so many of us, when we go into a bank to borrow money, we get sweaty palms. We're not exactly sure what to say. I did that. And then I was at a party one night. I was talking to a guy, and he said his name was Vince Lombardi.
Oh.
Looked at him twice, because I said, "You're not Vince Lombardi." It was his son.
No kidding.
Yeah, Vince Lombardi Jr., who's a very good friend of mine now, 30 years later. And so we're chatting about.
But I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's the ultimate sports name drop.
Oh, yeah. Is it?
Oh, my God. That's a conversation starter.
Well, yeah. I just looked at him like he was trying to kid me, but, he looks a lot like his dad, very, very much so. But he said, "Roger, you ought to be speaking of business conventions." He says, "I do that. I'll be happy to introduce you to my agent." So he did. And I said, "Well, I think I can put together a speech." And I quickly found out it's a lot easier to find a new audience than it is a new speech. So I was traveling around to business conventions around the country, teaching people how to borrow money from a banker. And I did that, guys. I left the bank in 84, and I did that to about 1990. And then I just kind of got tired of it, and, I wanted to move on. So I continued to do the investments. But then fast forward to about 2010, I discovered something called pickleball. And wow, pickleball, I don't know if you guys know much about it, fastest growing sport in the country. Is just absolutely exploding.
So, Roger, what caused you to start playing pickleball?
Well, I just ended up at the gym one day, and they introduced the program, and I knew nothing about it. I had heard a little bit about it because it was created outside of Seattle, and I'm from Seattle. And so I knew the name, but I knew nothing about it. I learned that it's kind of a combination of tennis and ping pong and badminton. That's what I learned on the first day. But most importantly, I just had a lot of fun. So I started playing this game. And, let me share with you kind of why it's growing so fast. I mean, the New York Times had an article last week. The headline ran, "Is pickleball ready for prime time?" Last month, I was talking to a reporter for the Boston Globe. He was doing some research. The article came out, and it said, pickleball might be the fastest growing sport in the history of America. It's just exploding. And so maybe the question is why? Well, there's several reasons for it. One is it's just so darn easy to learn. I mean, almost anybody can learn the game in an hour. And that's not true with a lot of sports. I've been trying to learn golf for 40 years. I probably never will. But here's a game that you can learn in an hour. It's played on a small court. It's about a third the size of a tennis court. Now, what that means is you get really good exercise, but it's not nearly as hard on the body as like playing regular tennis. All right. Number three, it's inexpensive. You can get a paddle for like $75, and a ball is $2 or $3 and will last many games. Is very social. Almost all games are doubles. So you have 4 people on the court. You play a game to 11. It usually lasts about 12 or 13 minutes. And then you go to the sidelines and 4 more people come on. So you rotate with a lot of different people. And that's, I knew the founder. I got to know the founder, and he says probably the most social sport ever created because of the interaction. But the number one reason that pickleball is growing so fast is it's just plain fun. And you guys go out the court, and oftentimes you'll hear somebody say, "OMG." You know what that means?
Yeah.
What?
I think it's a trick question, DM.
Yeah. Maybe I don't.
Well, you want to take a guess?
Well, OMG, just in text messages, oh my God, right?
Yeah, no, one more game.
Ah.
Yeah, You're right. It was a trick question. All right. So I fell in love with the game, and I said, with my background as being a professional speaker, I can teach this game, and I like to tell people what to do. So I started teaching it.
Tell us about. I'm sorry. I wanted to have you lay out real quick how the game was created and named, because I saw the story, but I want you to share it with our listeners because you tell the story really well.
Yeah. Well, what happened was a guy by the name of Joe. Now, this happened outside of Seattle on Bainbridge Island. They got all these summer homes on the, on the island, and a guy by the name of Joe Pritchard was out playing golf with his buddy Bill Bell, and they came home. And you might recognize Joe's name because he later ended up in Congress. And anyway, what happened that day was the kids were whining, "I'm bored. There's nothing to do. I want to go back to Seattle." All that type of stuff that kids do. And Joel said, "You guys go out back and you just set up the badminton net and play some badminton if you're bored." Well, they got up there, they set everything up, but they couldn't find the birdies. They walk around, they looked high and low, they couldn't find the birdies. So about that time, Dickie Green, age 13, is walking down the street with a wiffle ball and a plastic bat. And what they did was they took that wiffle ball and they tried to hit it over the net. Of course, they couldn't do that because of the badminton racket. So they went to my friend Barney McCollum's garage and grabbed some ping pong paddles, and that was the beginning of the game.
And this was in the 1960s about?
This was in 1965. And they found out everybody kind of loved this game. So what they did was, and I want to get into in a minute why it's named pickleball, but they said, let's promote this. Let's go to Spalding and Wilson and the other companies and try to promote this. Well, they went to them and they went to some trade shows, but the companies kind of turned their nose up. They said, well, you got a wooden paddle here that costs $5 and you got a plastic ball that at the time was 50 cents. There's no money to be made. We'd rather sell tennis shoes. So the sport really didn't have an awful lot of activity growth-wise, even though they tried to promote the sport during the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and around 2000 something happened. And what happened was baby boomers started retiring to Arizona and Florida in particular. They learned about pickleball, they fell in love with the game, and then they came back north and wanted to play it. And we don't have a lot of statistics from back then, but one statistic we have is in 2003, there was only 39 known public places to play around the country, just 39. And right now it's almost 10,000.
I remember like over the past probably 10 years, I started to see it like pop-up courts.
Yeah.
And, like either on the beach or, at a park or whatever. I got in a couple of games here and there, and you could see instantly you get hooked on it really quick. And part of the reason exactly what you described, it's just really easy to jump in and play, and big, small, whatever, athletic, non-athletic, everybody can join into it. But I want to fast forward a few years when you started playing pickleball. I understand that you were watching a 60-minute segment on the Cook County Jail that turned a light bulb on for you. And then what was it specifically that moved you about that piece? And then what prompted you to, I guess, get in the game?
Well, my wife and I oftentimes watch 60 Minutes. They had, as you said, a segment on Sheriff Tom Dart, who does the best he can at running Cook County Jail in Chicago. They got 7,000 to 8,000 people that flow through that system every year. I mean, Chicago's a really tough place. And what happens is Chicago has more homicides than New York City and LA combined. I mean, that's just a shocking statistic. And I'm watching this piece, and the guys are just kind of sitting around playing cards, chatting, watching a little bit of TV. And I said to my wife, I said, they should be playing pickleball. They'd be getting exercise. Plus, they'd also learn life skills like thinking about consequences, learning from mistakes, becoming a better teammate, all that type of thing. And I said, I'm going to write Sheriff Dart a letter and tell him exactly what I think. Not only that, but I'm willing to go back to Chicago and teach those men and women how to play the game.
Instantly, a pickleball ambassador was born, because a lot of people will watch a segment like that and then go, oh, they should be doing this, but very few put pen to paper, and then, we'll say, hey, I'll come to you and we'll start doing this. So that's pretty cool.
Well, looking back at it, I think it is kind of cool. So many times we say, well, this ought to happen or that happened, or I'm going to write a letter, but then we go on. Well, you can probably thank my wife for that, because when I said that, she says, not so fast. Sheriff Dart's a very busy person. I don't know if you'll get a response. Don't be disappointed if you don't get a response. Well, then I had to write a letter, didn't I?
That's right. She was calling you out, right?
Yeah, I didn't know if I'd get a response.
You can't take that sitting down.
Yeah, that's right. But she can't talk to me that way. All right.
Well, wait, I want to stop you right there, because that's actually my next question. But I want to make it bigger than just your wife. What did your friends and family say when you told them at the time this is what you were going to do?
Oh, I had no idea if I was going to do it or not. I mean, you can always make the offer, but I didn't, so I sat down and I wrote the letter, but I didn't know if he was going to say, come on back, or even answer the letter. And so that's so I didn't tell anybody I did it, other than the conversation we had in our house.
Okay. Well, how about that follow-up then? Like, okay, after he said, yeah, and you're coming out there.
Wait a minute. There's a big step between that and him saying yes.
Okay.
Now, as you can imagine, he gets all kinds of mail, and he gets mail from an awful lot of kooks, doesn't he? And he gets this letter from
Edmonds, Washington.
From a guy in Seattle talking about something, balls and pickles and all that stuff. And I imagine he just kind of sat there and rolled his eyes. But what happened was he happened to mention it over the dinner table that night, about getting this letter from this guy in Seattle on balls and pickles or something along that line. And I understand his 8-year-old daughter put her hands on her hips and said, oh, Dad, I'll tell you about pickleball. And she did. That's the first he heard about it.
So you had a believer at the dinner table that did your work for you. That's great.
She did. She was 8 years old at the time. All right. But if it hadn't been for her, probably none of this would have ever happened.
That is a great backstory.
Yeah. So isn't it though? I mean, that's really,
it really is.
Yeah.
It's almost like destiny, right? It was made to happen.
Well, who knows? But anyway, so what happened is I heard from his office. I didn't hear from him directly. Obviously, I heard from his subordinate, and they said, well, if you're serious, come on back.
Well, Roger, I'm assuming the first time you went to jail or prison, it was like going to the moon. I mean, had you ever had any experience with a correctional facility or even the criminal justice system, in general?
None. Absolutely none. I've never seen the inside of a jail or prison, or, I didn't have any idea. And I'll tell you, it's one thing to talk about going back to Chicago. It's another one to be back there.
Sure.
All right. And you look at this thing, and Cook County Jail is about the size of 75 football fields. Wire fence all around.
Okay, so paint the picture for us of your very first jail visit. So you're going back to pitch pickleball, right? And then what was like the security measures and some of the sights and sounds and all that?
I took an Uber to the location I was supposed to be. I get out and it said Division 10 maximum security. And my heart went up to my throat, because I'd never been inside a jail or a prison before. My intentions were good. But, I thought of my wife. She says, your intentions are good, but is it a good idea? Well, I didn't know. But what's interesting to me is I was there a week, and after I walked out, at the end of the week, I looked back at that sign, and I realized how much I had learned about what goes on the inside. The number one thing I guess I'd say is most of those guys, and 90% of them are men, never had much of a chance in life. They grew up in poverty. They often had a dysfunctional household. For most of them, their role models were older kids in the neighborhood. Well, that's just code for saying gang members. And not only that, but for many of those kids, it's not a matter of if they're going to join a gang, it's a matter of which one do they need to join for protection. and how terrible that is and how unfortunate that is. All right. But that's their role models. That's their values. And being a gang member is an awful lot like being involved in the mafia. You want to move up. You want to impress your friends. You want to be a man. You get involved in criminal activity. Well, sooner or later, all that means is you're going to end up in Cook County Jail. So that's without a doubt the most important thing I learned when I was on the inside. But I also learned something else that was really significant. And that is how much mental illness there is.
Oh, for sure.
On the inside. You can talk, and you guys, well, as you well know, you can talk to some of these people and they're just not quite tracking with you. And they're just a little bit slow. And I found myself during that week sitting on the bench with one particular, he was a kid to me, he's probably 25, and I related to him particularly well. And, it's not appropriate to really say to somebody, what'd you do? Why are you here? I equate it when I tell others, I say it's a little bit like asking some people their age. They might tell you the truth, they might not. They might be offended, they might not. But you just don't go up to somebody and say, why are you in jail? But for whatever reason, I'm sitting there with him. We're relating particularly well. And I said, what the hell are you doing here? He gave me an honest answer. He looked me in the eye and he says, I'm bipolar. I was off my meds. I didn't mean to kill him. Those are the type of conversations that stay with you and you never forget.
Well, Roger, I'm curious, what kind of skills and instincts do you borrow from your past career, as you're now teaching pickleball in these jails and prisons?
Well, I try to make things simple. And probably the most important thing I do is I don't try to get in the way. Pickleball, there's a magic quality about it. The people play it, they'll love it. I am there for them. So many people, I think, that try to teach or try to talk, they make it too much about themselves. Let me tell you about my grandkids. Let me tell you about what I did with pickleball and how I hurt my knee, on and on. But I'm very effective on the inside. But what I want to do is I want to teach them the game and then let the game
speak for itself. Yeah.
For them.
Yeah.
All right. I'm not there to make friends. I don't want to, that's all I want to do. And as we talked earlier, it's such a simple game that once I teach some people the rules, then they can teach others.
How do you think playing pickleball benefits both the inmates and the officers?
Well, all right, I'm going to answer that this way. I've been to Chicago 3 times. The last time I was there was a reporter for USA Today, a sports reporter. I didn't know he was going to be there, and he's going to write a story for the sports page. He wrote the story. I thought things went well. He called me up a couple of days later and he said, Roger, it's not going to be on the sports page. And my heart sank. I mean, my initial reaction was, I thought it was a good story. Why are they killing the story? And then he went on to say, the editors are so impressed, they're going to put this on the front page. All right. Now, to answer your question directly, in that piece, and anybody can pull it up online, just Google my name or pickleball and Cook County Jail. There's 2 things that I think are really significant. The first is by Jim Edmondson, and I don't know his exact title. I'll say he's kind of like in charge of athletics. But what he says in the piece is, since pickleball, disciplinary problems are down. Guys want to play so much that they're behaving themselves more because if they get into trouble, they can't play. Now, that's really significant. What a difference if we can introduce any type of activity at all on the inside that's going to reduce violence, because they have anywhere from 10 to 20 fights a day. Okay. But the second thing, and to answer that question, is if you pull up the piece, you can see a picture of myself and a guy by the name of Clarence. And as that picture was taken, he's pointing out to the court. And he said, Roger, look out there. you have gang members from opposite gangs. Before pickleball, some of them would not even talk to each other. Now look at them. They're not only playing with and against each other, they're also laughing together. That blew me away. I never, ever expected something like that.
Yeah, that's great. And Roger, add to that. Tell us about the concept of a group hug.
Well, what's common in pickleball is after you play a game, you walk up the net and you tap paddles. Good game. Well, years ago, what I started doing was I just kind of nicknamed that as a group hug. And so here I am in Chicago, and we worked through the first game, and I'm up by the net, and it's over. And the guys really transformed from being very macho to being what I would almost call like kids on a playground. They just turned into kids having fun, and the game's over, and the game is over, and everybody's smiling. And I'm up in the net, and I said, "All right, everybody, group hug."
They must have just looked at you sideways.
Oh yeah, who is it? Who is this guy? And they all froze. They wouldn't move. And so I put up my paddle.
No one wanted to be first, right?
Yeah. The guy next to me put up his paddle, and then the rest of them did it. And I said, "Guys, that's a group hug." Well, then they burst into laughter. They thought that was really funny.
No, it's great sportsmanship. Like after a basketball game or whatever, you shake hands with your opponent. That's
absolutely.
Great.
But you guys will appreciate this, because in a place like, and you can see the situation, somebody like me doesn't come in often to teach a game like this, called something like pickleball. And so, we're there all week long playing, it's the talk of the jail. Every once in a while, somebody high and important comes down to the gym, because what happens, you can spot them instantly because they're wearing a suit and tie, right? And so they strut into the gym just to kind of check the thing out. Well, this one person did, this older man, he walks into the gym, and the first thing he hears is somebody yelling out, "Group hug, everybody." And his head just snapped. He couldn't believe what he heard.
So tell me the story. I think you said an officer had actually joined one of the games at one time?
Well, more than once. What I did was, I guess, a lot of times in life, if you don't know something can be done, you just kind of go out and do it anyway. And I thought it was great to have the inmates. They're actually detainees, of course, because until they're convicted, they're a detainee plan. But I said, well, why not have the staff as well as the detainees play together? And so I suggested that, and there was initially a little bit of resistance, but the superintendent said, "Hey, that's a great idea. I'll be down tomorrow morning and we'll play." So once he did, then other staff members did the same thing.
God, that's great.
Yeah, isn't that great?
Well, Roger, obviously COVID has put a damper on your prison ball evangelism, but have you been able to start up again, or do you know when you will be able to start up?
Well, I've been to other places in Chicago, of course. I was in New York. I opened up a state of Washington with several sites. California is really excited about pickleball. I was down there for a week. The thing was just starting to blow up wide open. I was scheduled to go over to Colorado, New Hampshire, and I was working with a colleague, as well as Massachusetts, and then COVID hit. Well, as you guys know, it's really a challenge on the inside these days. And COVID, they can't have social distancing. You got a lot of people that won't have shots, et cetera. So everything just came to a stop. And it has been that way until it's just starting to loosen up a little bit. I don't know exactly when I'll be going back on the inside. But the really good news is you got an awful lot of people who are so enthusiastic about pickleball. They're called ambassadors, and there's about 2,000 of them around the country. And because of publicity, they've read stories about me, and about once a month I hear from somebody that says, "I think that's a terrific idea. I want to introduce pickleball into the jails and prisons in my state. How do you do that?" And I say, well, right now we're on hold, but as soon as COVID permits, we can go back on the inside. So that's really where we are, guys.
That's great. I don't put a negative on this, but have you had any scary moments in there, like where you thought like, hey, this wasn't such a good idea?
Well,
when you've been inside a jail or a prison?
Yeah, there was two, and the mind works so fast. And one instance was when I was back at Rikers Island. Now, Rikers Island is a jail for New York City. And as you can imagine what that's like. And
hellhole.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's been in the press a lot. I mean, they got 100,000 people that flow through there every year. I mean, they have really hard problems. And a lot of people don't know that it's very noisy inside a jail and prison. And I equate it a little bit like to the start of a college football game where everybody gathers around the coach really close so they can hear him. And I was back there one day and teaching people the game, and we went through the group hug and all that stuff. And they're right around me, and I said, "Okay, that's it for today. I guess I don't know if I'll see you again, but I hope you guys get out soon and have a good life." And all of a sudden, the guy next to me, and they were very close to me, a great big man right next to me, picked me up. And the first thought that went through my mind was, "It's over. I'm going over. Down. It's over." And then he let go and he said, "Group hug, Roger."
And your heart started.
Yeah, my heart started again. Yeah. Well, he really got me on that one, I'll tell you.
I bet. Hey, I want to kind of expand on that. And I don't mean this one negatively, but do the inmates have any nicknames for you that you know of?
No, not that I know of. Some of them call me Mr. Roger.
Okay, I could see that.
Yeah. Which that's what comes to mind is one of the correction officers said to me one day. He said, I'd been there for a couple, 3 days. He says, "Roger, some of these guys are not going to remember your name, but they are going to remember what you did for them of introducing them to pickleball."
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Did you say you had one more scary story you were going to share?
Well, it was in Chicago. And what happened was I had security with me on the inside. And I was told, and I didn't figure it out at first because that's how naive I am. I was told there's a body associated with everybody in the room but me. And I had to think, I said, "What does that mean?" And he kind of chuckled and says, "They've all been charged with murder." Well, that causes a person to kind of pause and reflect a little bit because because of mental illness, somebody could go off or whatever. And then, I'm in this cage because it was outside and there was maybe 15 or 20 detainees and my security was there. And I looked up and all of a sudden he wasn't there. And I don't know if he had to take a bathroom break or whatever, but I realized I was all by myself with these men that had been charged with murder. Nothing happened, of course, but I had, for a few seconds there, I was very self-conscious. I'll put it that way.
I can imagine. Well, let's go the other way. Tell us about some of the inspiring or feel-good moments you've had while teaching pickleball in the correctional facilities.
Well, it's just, when I was first introduced to the detainees the very first time, it was more like a locker room situation. And I stood up and I thought I'd give them a little background about the sport and Joe Pritchard and, just a little bit of the basics. They had absolutely no interest. Arms were crossed. People were looking around the room. Everybody act bored. And I thought maybe my wife was right. My intentions were good, but it wasn't a good idea. And I didn't know if that night I'd be heading back to Seattle. But all I knew for sure is it wasn't working. Not knowing what to do, I said, "Well, let's go out to the courts." And so we did. And there was, I bet within 5 minutes time, 180-degree transformation that they had absolutely no interest in anything I had to say, to listen to every single word. And I equate it, like I said earlier, like kids on a playground. And the last time I was there, when I walked in, is guys were giving them high fives. They're saying, "Hey, Roger's back, everybody. We're playing pickleball." just terrific. And what a feeling that is to realize how much joy you're bringing to them. Because guilty or innocent, they're around other people who have been charged with crimes and could be looking at some serious time. But when they're out on that court, what happens is their world goes away.
Oh yeah, it's like an oasis for an hour that they're playing. They're not inside. They're
That's right.
out playing sports with their friends. They could be anywhere.
And that's true for all of us, but it's especially true for them because look at the amount of stress that they're under. If they've been charged with let's say murder, and everybody around them is kind of in the same situation, everybody's pretty much short-tempered. They got stress 24 hours a day. But once they're out on the court, there's a lot of relaxation because they're just having so much fun. And they're thinking about trying to hit a ball over the net.
Simple as playing the game.
Yep.
Is there any particular story, situation, or person that I think you mentioned one already, a Clarence, that had an impact on you that you still think about?
Well, this is kind of a cute story. And when I mentioned that guy that I told you, this bipolar. Obviously, I think about him from time to time because of how sad, because he was off his meds and the things that happened. But I'll share a cute story with you that I really got a kick out of it. And it was in Chicago. And again, it's so noisy in there. You have a hard time thinking. And, I'm trying to teach the rules. And there was this guy that came up to me and he looked like an NFL lineman. I mean, he had to be at least 320 pounds. And I would guess he was from Eastern Europe. That's where he looked. And he screamed some question in my ear. And of course, I screamed back at him, "What?" He screamed again. I was like, what happens if it hits the line? Is that in or out? Something like that. And he goes back to play. And he was a good athlete because he played ping pong and he was quick on his feet, even though he's a huge man. A couple of minutes later, he's back and he has another question. Then he goes back. And then all of a sudden, one of the correction officers comes over to me and says, "Excuse me, Roger, but were you guys talking to each other?" Well, I said to myself, that's a silly question. I said, "Yes, we were talking to each other." And he says, "Well, he's been here a month and he hasn't said a single word to anybody. We didn't know if he could talk."
Oh, wow.
No kidding.
Wow.
Yeah. All right. And what's humorous about this story is the corrections officer was from the Bronx. It was easier for me to understand the guy that might have been from Poland than it was for me to understand the
I'll buy that.
Yeah.
That's actually, you created a mini segue for me. Do you have any aspirations of perhaps teaching pickleball in correctional facilities in other countries?
No. What I do is how do I want to answer that? I just try to stay focused. And, there's such a need in this country that's where I want to make an impact. And people ask me about my goals, and I give them probably a different answer than they expect, is I don't necessarily believe in setting goals. All right? Because you set a goal, you reach the goal, then you set another goal and you reach that, and then you set another, and finally you die. I think it's much more important to move in a direction. All right? Come from a place of intentions and what is the direction you want to move in? Because by doing that, you enjoy the process so much more and you're open to opportunities that come along. I'll give you an example of that is what happened last summer is I got invited to give a speech on what I do inside prisons. Well, I hadn't thought about that. I mean, I thought a lot about going inside, but I hadn't thought about giving a speech. So guys, I gave one speech and it's ballooned to a dozen speeches. All right. And then from that, what's happened is I'm ending up on these podcasts. I was on one yesterday and I'm working with you guys today. So isn't it wonderful that the word is getting out through the media and social media because it's the direction I'm going as compared to having a particular goal?
I could see you doing a TED Talk one day.
Well, it might happen.
Well, Roger, as a part of my day job, I spent a fair amount of time at the LA County Jail. And I'm just curious if you've approached the LA Sheriff's Department about potentially bringing pickleball to LA County.
it was on my list. I
Great.
didn't because of COVID. All right. I was at Corcoran. Now that's where Charles Manson spent a week.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, it went great. The terrific thing for me is I have the support out of Department of Corrections out of Sacramento. They know my background. They see the results in other places. They're very supportive. They're talking about me encouraging for grant money. They're opening doors. And once those doors open, then I can go in because I know what the product's going to be. I know how it's going to be received.
Yeah, that's half the battle. If you can get Sacramento on board, you're getting closer to the finish line.
Well, yeah, and that's exactly right. Is once I have that support, because I was supposed to go up to Pelican Bay, I was supposed to go to Folsom, I was supposed to go to San Quentin. I mean, those were all scheduled, and then COVID shut us down. So I very definitely want to go to LA, and I live in Rancho Mirage, which is by Palm Springs, and I'm confident that will happen.
Great.
But again, and we can chat some more about that, and maybe you can help me along that line.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah,
Mehul's a great insider for that. Absolutely.
Terrific.
What's the I guess I want to use the word goal because you explain your thoughts on that, but what do you ultimately hope to accomplish by bringing pickleball to our country's jails and prison?
I think it's already happening. I mean, what better testimonial than that the USA Today article that talks about reducing violence and getting people to communicate together that and I was thinking, just a matter of fact, I told a friend just the other day, is in our society, there's all this sensitivity training in corporations, and it doesn't matter what the topic is, but you bring people together and you got some people that believe and some people that don't. And what everybody does is it kind of makes sure that they don't say something that's incorrect. And maybe at the end of the day that you've moved the needle a little bit forward. Let's hope so. You take that scenario versus you take a situation that you have two groups of people, for whatever reason, they won't even talk to each other, and that they can come together over any activity and not only talk to each other, but laugh together. There just has to be some positive outgrowth of that situation. And pickleball has shown to be able to do that. Now, sure, not the only one, but how wonderful is that? And you guys know much more about the criminal justice challenges we have in this country than I'll ever know. But it's just wonderful if you can bring people together and have some activity where they can communicate.
Roger, can you see yourself writing a book about this topic?
Well, I haven't thought about that, but I've written a book before, so I can sit down at a typewriter.
That's good.
Yeah. Well, but I think you see where I'm coming from. I don't set goals per se, because I don't believe in that, because you're trying to live in the future. But if your intentions are good and you're moving in a certain direction, then good things happen.
Absolutely. You're such a great ambassador for not only the game, but what the game can do for people on the inside.
Well, thank you very much.
It's been a real pleasure speaking with you today, and we really appreciate you sharing your story with us. And we wish you all the best, and for you to just keep up the great work.
Well, thank you, and let's stay in touch, huh?
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Roger. Such a great interview. What a unique guy, and what a clever way of making things better, not only for detainees but for the correctional facilities, and really ultimately society itself. And I know Roger is big on using this term detainees, and I think it makes a lot of sense. So there is a difference between prison and jail. So in jail is, you're arrested, you go to jail, you're awaiting your day in court, may or may not get convicted. If you went to prison, you were convicted. So I think using the term detainee versus inmate actually makes a lot of sense, particularly at the jail level.
I totally agree. And it's, I think it takes away a lot of the stigma that goes with it, because you have not been convicted yet. Right.
That's it.
It was interesting. We were talking about Roger. and his book, and he was kind of coy about writing it.
Yeah.
But judging by the taste of his stories in his repertoire, we definitely need to hear more from this guy.
Yeah, you can tell he's got a lot more wonderful stories in there. And what I was going to say, one of the thoughts that we didn't get around to in the interview is this idea that a large percentage of the detainees and prisoners that Roger interacts with, they're someday going to be back in society. Not everybody's a lifer. And I think, as a matter of fact, the figure is something like 90% of the people will be back out on the streets sometime.
That's exactly right. So it makes perfect sense to try to rehab these people. You've got to be creative. You just think outside the box on how this is done. And it seems that pickleball, for all the reasons Roger explained, somehow has the magic to make a real impact.
Yeah, for some reason, that just seems to be the secret sauce. And, you hear about Roger's success in the States and you kind of think, well, maybe this could be done worldwide. But I think that, Roger was exactly right on. It's really most needed in the States. And to that point, check out this quote from the Prison Policy Initiative website. Not only does the U.S. have the highest incarceration rate in the world, every single U.S. state incarcerates more people per capita than virtually any independent democracy on earth. To be sure, states like New York and Massachusetts appear progressive in their incarceration rates compared to states like Louisiana, but compared to the rest of the world, every U.S. state relies too heavily on prisons and jails to respond to crime.
That's definitely not a list that you want to be first on.
No, nothing to be proud of.
No. It's good now with COVID seemingly dying down. It's great that Roger can get back to his mission. It also seems like he's created quite an army out there of other folks who are helping to bring pickleball to correctional facilities all across the country. At least that's the sense I got.
I think so. I think this is a wave of criminal justice reform in this unique way. And I think it's going to continue to go and grow. And like I say, I really hope it comes to LA County. Yeah, Dion, isn't it such a interesting, like, in your mind, a visual juxtaposition of Roger, who's, I'd say a conservative looking white man in his 70s, and he's working in the toughest conditions with the scariest of people. And he's trying to make a huge difference. I mean, what did you think of Roger's account of entering a jail for the first time?
Yeah, we always try to, at least I do, every time we get someone that's doing this kind of work inside the prisons or jails, I always try to get their hot take on what it was like, walking through. And with Roger, he was so calm. He didn't seem the least bit intimidated by the venue.
Yeah, he didn't. But, this is a guy he's got a lot of life experience, and, he swam with the sharks in the finance world too. So he's probably no softy. I wanted to add on to that too, Dion. There's a little bit of a difference when you're going to jail versus going to prison. In my experience, and I typically just go to jails. If I have a court order, pretty much they're going to let me in. That's all there is to it. Now, recently I went to prison. Well, I visited a prison for the first time. There was a lot more to it. You have to get cleared before you can even go. It's a little bit harder to get an appointment. You read all the rules and regulations. And like one of them is that, hey, they don't negotiate if you're taken hostage. So you know that going in. And there's a list of rules about what you can bring in. You can bring a wallet. You can only bring 2 keys. And in terms of the dress code, you can't wear anything that would look like the inmate uniform for obvious reasons. So you can't wear denim or anything like that. So I get all approved for my visit last week. I roll up there after a long drive. I go through the metal detector. They check my ID, all this kind of good stuff. And then the lady who was helping me out in the visitor center says, gosh, your pants, I don't know if that's going to work. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, they're similar blue to inmate pants. Now, mind you, I'm wearing blue dress pants. I'm not wearing like these sort of sweatpants or scrubs that an inmate may have. So she goes and talks to the sergeant and says, look, I got this idiot here. I'm just going to drive him over to swab this guy, and that's it. No, wasn't having it. So I had to drive over to the local Walmart, buy a pair of black dress pants, change in the Walmart bathroom, and go back to the prison. And luckily, they let me back in. And I've heard a lot of stories similar. And sometimes you wonder if they're just making you jump through hoops. Maybe those pants were actually okay. I don't know, Dion.
Just because they can.
Sure. I mean, that would be kind of fun, I guess.
So we're really proud to promote Roger and his work on our podcast, and we can't wait to hear more about his future efforts. I think this is going to continue to gain momentum, and we'll probably see a lot more segments on 60 Minutes.
Well said. And with that, we truly appreciate all of you listeners, followers, and subscribers. Now, you are subscribed, right?
We hope so.
Check us out at verbal.com. That's VURBL.com. And, hit that subscribe button. Why miss out? We look forward also to hearing your feedback on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and now on the shiny new Crime Redefined LinkedIn page. So be well, everyone, and we can't wait to bring you more content.
Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Crime Redefined. Please send us your comments and questions and join us for the next episode.